Now we will solve a problem from chapter 11. The first problem we are going to do today is E1123A. And this problem is asking to calculate the material and labor variance. Remember, for direct material, we will calculate the direct material price variance and direct material quantity variance. And for the labor part, we will calculate the direct labor rate variance and direct labor efficiency variance. And if you watched my previous lecture on chapter 11, you probably watched that I prefer to use the boxes, and that boxes will help you to know all the formula. And for this chapter you really need to know the formula. I hope you can also check the formula sheet that is posted on your blackboard side. So let's read the problem. It says that Bodgard, which uses a standard cost accounting system, manufactured 210,000 boat fenders during the year using 1,780,000 feet of extruded vinyl purchased at $0.30 per foot. Production required 4,900 direct labor hours that cost $13 per hour. The material standard was 8 feet of vinyl per fender at a standard cost of $1.40 per foot. The labor standard was 0.024 direct labor hour per fender at a standard cost of $12 per hour. So first we will calculate the price and quantity variance for direct material. So let's try to do the direct material variances. I'll write it down. First we are going to do the direct material variances. Remember, we actually will have two types of direct material variances. One is the direct material price variance and another is the direct material quantity variance. So to do the direct material price variance, we basically will use the first and second box. So if you check from your PowerPoint slides on chapter 11, you should have some idea, but I'm repeating it. In your first box, you always will have all actual numbers. That means your direct material actual cost, which is determined how much direct material you actually use, which is AQ. AQ means the actual quantity of the direct material, and then AP. AP means the actual price of per unit of direct material. And then here we in our first box we will include all actual, and in our last box, or the third box, we will all include standard. That means we will use the standard quantity, what should be the ideal or standard amount of direct material for per unit of product, and then we're gonna multiply it with by standard price of those direct materials. Remember, the first box is all actual and the last box is all standard. Now in the middle box, it will be a combination of actual and standard, and in the middle box, or the second box, we will use the actual quantity of direct material and we're gonna multiply it by the standard price of the direct material. Now if you compare this first and second box, you will see the main difference here is the price. In our first box we are using the actual price, and in our second box we are using the standard price. So here we will call it direct material price variance. Now if you check the second and third box, you will see that in your second box you have actual quantity times standard price, and in your third box you have standard quantity times standard price. That means in both boxes you are using the standard price, but the main difference between box 2 and 3 is the quantity. In box 2 you have the actual quantity, and in box 3 you have the standard quantity. So the difference of box 2 and 3 will be known known as the quantity variance. So we'll call it direct material. DM stands for direct material quantity variance. So now you need to calculate this direct material price variance and direct material quantity variance. Again, I prefer to use this type of boxes, and I prefer to show these differences, but you can also memorize the formula and you can also apply those whatever you feel comfortable. So now let's try to calculate our first variance, which is the direct material price variance, and we'll try to do it here. Direct material price variance. So direct material price variance is one sense is the difference between the first box and the second box. So what I could do here, I could also write down the formula here. It's AQ times AP, actual quantity times actual price, minus actual quantity times standard price. And we will show this difference here. So now if I show this one here, I am trying to show it in one box so that it all fit nicely here. Now if I want to show it here, you need to read the question and you need to figure out all this actual information. So what is the actual quantity of direct material? Remember, in this problem what we are producing, we are actually producing here both fenders. That's our final product, and for this product we actually need this extruded vinyl. So the actual quantity is 1,780,000 feet of extruded vinyl, which is our direct material. And it is also said here that the actual price that they paid is $1.30. So now you know the actual quantity and actual price of those direct material. What I will plug in here. So my actual quantity is 1,780,000 feet of extruded vinyl, and the price per foot is $1.30. So I am using it here. This is my actual box, and then I will subtract here the second box, which is again actual quantity, but we're gonna use the standard price. So the actual quantity is again same, 1,780,000 feet of extruded vinyl. And if you check the standard price of per feet, so you can read it carefully, and it says that the standard cost of per feet is $1.40. So now we're gonna use the standard price. Remember, the main difference between the first and second box is the price, and we call it the direct material price variance, and we know here the standard price is $1.40. So now if you do this, that means if you multiply this first part, what you will find here, I'll just use a equal sign so that you can easily identify this. And in my, I just wanted to show all in this box, one box under this direct material price variance. And if you multiply these two, what I found, please use your calculator. I found 1,780,000 times 1.3. It is, of course, the dollar value, $2,314,000. That's actually your actual cost. Now, if you take this standard part, and you will figure it out, 1,780,000 times $1.40. what I found here is $2,492,000. Now if you take the difference, 2,314,000 minus 2,492,000, first just take the difference and then we will check whether it's a favorable one or unfavorable one. So the difference I found here is $178,000. And now we will decide whether it's a favorable variance or an unfavorable variance. Check the first box, or the first part is the actual cost and the second part is the standard cost. Remember, when all these are costs and when your actual cost is higher than the standard cost, then it should be an unfavorable one. On the other hand, if the actual costs are lower than the standard cost, then it should be a favorable. The actual cost is lower, that means you actually spend less than what you expected to spend or what you planned or what you determined as per your standard requirement. So if actual is lower than the standard, it's favorable. So if you compare here, you see the actual part is lower than the standard box, so we will call it a favorable variance and I will write down a F next to it. And this is how you can calculate your direct material price variance. Now we're gonna calculate direct material quantity variance. So for direct material quantity variance, we will use the same formula, and I am trying to use a same formula here, and I will try to show it under this quantity box. It's a little bit inconvenient since I'm using the Word and an Excel sheet. So just to make it a little bit better, I will just make this type of boxes. So now we're gonna show the direct material quantity variance, and I'm gonna show it here in this box. So direct material quantity variance, here again our second box versus the third box. And if I would like to show you this one, then what I can do here, this is our first box and this is our second box. Now we are going to compare the second versus the third box, and when we compared first versus the second box, we called it direct material price variance. Now we are comparing the second versus third box and we will call it as direct material quantity variance. So now if you see here how to do the direct material quantity variance, we will actually use the formula here, AQ times SP, which is our second box, and then we will subtract the third box from here, which is SQ times SP. And remember, we are now comparing box number 2 and box number 3, and the main difference is the quantity. In both cases we are using the standard price, but the difference is in box 2 we are using actual quantity and in box 3 we are using a standard quantity of your direct material, and that's why we call it the quantity variance. Now the good part is here for this box 2's information is already we have here. Actual quantity, we already know that actual quantity means it's 1,780,000 feet, and the standard price, that means this box is already here, the second part of the first problem that we just did. Standard cost is $1.40. This is the second box. Now we're gonna show the third box. Remember, for the third box we all have to use the standard quantity times the standard price. So we already know standard price is $1.40. Now what is the standard quantity? how do you calculate the standard quantity? So here it is given that to produce one fender, remember the both fender is the final product, to produce one fender the material that they need, the standard is 8 feet of vinyl. So for one fender they need 8 feet of vinyl. Now we will check how many fenders they actually produced, and you will find this information here at the very beginning. They actually produced 210,000 boat fenders. So remember, these 8 feet is for one boat fender. They actually produced 210,000 boat fenders. So we have to multiply these two to find out the standard quantity of all those fenders that they actually produced. So they actually produced 210,000 fenders, and for each fender the standard quantity is 8 feet. So you're gonna multiply it by 8. So these two together is actually your SQ, or standard quantity. And now you're gonna multiply it by the standard price, and standard price is already given here. Standard price is $1.40. So now we will multiply all those numbers. Here AQ times SP, if you multiply these two, I already have this one here. You can either multiply it or take it from there. It's 2,492,000. Now if you multiply these all three, what I found, it's $2,352,000. And now if you take the difference, 2,492,000 minus 2,352,000, the difference I got is $140,000. Now you have to decide whether it's a favorable one or an unfavorable one. So the first box is based on the actual quantity and the second box is both standard. So that means the first part is our somewhat actual information and the second box is all standard. Now the actual, based on the actual quantity, you see that the actual part is actually higher than the standard part. Since the actual is higher than the standard, all these are costs, so it will be an unfavorable one. So I will write down an U, unfavorable one. So this is how you can calculate your direct material variances. Direct material variances, you have two types of variance. One is the price variance, another is the quantity variance. Now we're gonna do the same thing for our direct labor variance. So here we will do the same thing for direct labor variance. I will actually try to copy this box just for my convenience, but I hope you will do it by yourself. I am gonna copying this one so that it would be a little bit convenient for me, and sometimes it's hard to do all these problems by using this Word document rather than doing on hand. So now I will just delete all those, and of course we all will do it again together. And now we are doing direct labor variances. So for direct labor variance, again we all will have first box all actual, second box is a combination of actual and standard, and the third box will be all your standard information. So I will do this one. Now we are doing the direct labor variance. So in your first box we will be using all actual, and remember actual, we actually don't call it actual quantity for labor, we call it actual hours. So AH times AR. AR is the actual wage rate, right? And instead of calling it the price, we will call it the actual wage rate. So it's AH times AR, Again, the last box will be all standard. I prefer to do the first and last first because two are kind of extreme. One is all actual and the other is all standard. So here we will use SH times SR, which means the standard hours times the standard rate. And now in the middle box, what we gonna do in the middle box, we will actually show a combination of actual and standard. So again, here in the middle box, we will be using the actual hour, but we will use the standard rate. So here I am writing actual hour AH times SR. Now you will check one thing here is that if you check these first two boxes, the main difference is actually the rate, right? So in first box we used actual rate and in second box we used standard rate. So the main difference between the first and second box is the rate. So we will call it direct labor rate variance. Direct labor rate variance. So we're gonna call it direct labor rate variance. And if you compare the second and third box, you will find that the main difference here is actually the hours. I apologize, it's a little bit hard to do it by using this Excel sheet or Word, but I hope we will fix it. So please ignore all these shapes and signs here, but I hope you will understand what I am trying to show it here. So here in this box number 2 and 3, we are actually showing the main difference, which is based on the hours, and hour actually determines the efficiency of your labor. So we'll call it direct labor efficiency variance. And now if you know all this formula and you have all this information, now we will just plug in the numbers. So let's try to do the direct labor rate variance. Again, if I want to write down the formula, it's actual hour times actual rate, and then we will find the difference between actual hour times the standard rate. So now we have to check what is the actual hour and actual rate. Remember here, every information is given here, and it is also mentioned that they produced 210,000 boat fenders, and the actual hours they actually used is 4,900 direct labor hours. So this is our actual hour. We are using 4,900 times the actual rate, and the actual rate is given here that the direct labor hour, that the cost is $13 per hour. So it's given the direct labor actual cost is, or actual rate is $13. Now we will use the actual hours, which we just found 4,900, but we're gonna use the standard rate, and it is also mentioned that the labor hour standard cost is $12. So we're gonna use this standard rate. Now if you multiply these two, you will find the first part 4,900 times $13. What I found here is 63,700, and then for the second part I found 4,900 times $12, which is 58,800. And if you take the difference, I found the difference is 4,900. So now we have to compare. The first box is the actual part, and the second box is actually the standard part, and you have to compare what's the difference between the actual and the standard part, and you find here that the actual box or the actual cost box is 63,700 and the standard is 58,800. That means your actual is higher than the standard, so it is an unfavorable one. Remember, all these are costs, so if actual is higher than the standard, then it will be an unfavorable one. Now we will find out the direct labor efficiency variance, and again it is the comparison between box number 2 and box number 3. So in box 2 we have actual hours times standard rate, and in box 3 we have standard hours times the standard rate. Again, the third box is always standard, and the main difference between box 2 and 3 is the hour, which actually determines the efficiency of your labor force, and that's why we call it direct labor efficiency variance. So now for this part we actually have this information, 4,900 times $12. So I will write it down, 4,900 times $12. Now for the second part of this box, or the third box, is all standard hour and standard rate. Now standard rate we already know, standard rate is $12, but what is a standard hour? And here you will have this information. It says that the labor standard was 0.024 direct labor hour per fender. So 0.024 hour is for one fender, and they actually manufacture 210,000 both fenders. So we have to multiply these two to find out the standard hours for all those fenders that they produced. So it is 0.024, which is the standard hour for one fender, then times 210,000 fenders. That's what they actually manufactured or produced. So these two together is the total standard hour, or SH, and we're gonna multiply it by our standard rate, which we already know that the standard rate is $12. Now if you find this first part, what I found here, the first part is here. I already found it. It's 4,900 times $12, which I found 58,800. And for the second part, when you multiply these all three part numbers, 0.024 times 210,000 times $12, what I found is 60,480. It's 60,480. Now if you check the difference is basically 58,800 minus 60,480, which I found here is 1,680. And now you can check it. The first part is based on actual hours and the second part is all standard. You see the actual box is actually lower than all standard box, so that means our actual cost, all these are costs here, actual cost is lower than the standard cost, so we will call it a favorable one. Remember, all these are costs, so if actual is lower than the standard, then you will call it a favorable variance. And on the other hand, if you see that the actual is actually higher than the standard one, we'll call it non-favorable variance. So this is our answer for our direct labor rate variances. And I wanted to show you by using the boxes, which is really helpful, especially for remembering all those formulas, but it's a bit inconvenient. That's why the word format is not that good. But I hope you found the concept and you actually understand what I tried to show you.